annually 33,000 people die in India due to air pollution related issues.
PM2.5 can travel deep into the lungs and even into the bloodstream. If you're sitting in traffic for long periods of time, your exposure during that period could be upwards of 800 or 1000 micrograms per cubic meter.
Hello all, welcome to ETV Bharat. This is Shankar Narayanan Sudalai. With me today, we have very special guest, environmentalist Bhargav Krishna. Lancet Planetary Health Study report released recently. It has given very shocking outcomes, which says annually 33,000 people die in India due to air pollution related issues. The study also reveals that the national standard we follow for measuring PM2.5 in the air is inaccurate. Let us move on to the interview. Hello, Mr. Bhargav.
Thank you so much for having me, Shankar.
First of all, I want to know, please explain to us about the Lancet Planetary Health Study report, which is based on data from multi-cities of India. Is this first of these kind of reports?
Yes, absolutely. So this study that we've conducted, which has taken about a year and a half, 2 years to complete, is the first of its kind report which has studied mortality from short-term air pollution exposure. So air pollution that has occurred on the same day and the previous day across 10 cities. This has not been done before in India. And so this is the first time as well that we are generating new evidence on how air pollution exposure in the short term affects mortality in places like Bangalore, Chennai, Hyderabad, Kolkata, and Pune and Mumbai, cities for which there was no evidence that was generated before. In that way, this new study generates insights that are highly relevant for policy because we are seeing that the impact of air pollution isn't restricted only to northern cities like Delhi or other cities in the Indo-Gangetic Plain, but that effects of air pollution can be felt even in cities otherwise considered relatively cleaner in terms of their air pollution levels.
Actually, I saw in your report, I saw multiple terms. Across the report, we saw the term PM2.5. Could you please explain what is it and how is it measured?
So, if I were to put it in simple terms, there are two types of pollution that are generated when you burn any kind of fuel. That may be vehicular fuel, industrial fuel, cook stove emissions. The two types of pollution are particulate pollutions, which are very, very small microscopic particles that are generated as a byproduct of the combustion, or gaseous pollution. So, this could be carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide, nitrogen oxides, etc. PM2.5, which is the pollutant that we have chosen to focus on, is particulate matter which is smaller than 2.5 microns in size. So really microscopic to such an extent that it is extremely small compared to even the thickness of a human hair. Why PM2.5 is relevant is for two reasons. One, PM2.5 can travel deep into the lungs and even into the bloodstream and can cause all sorts of harms to both your lungs as well as your circulatory system in your heart. Second, the particle PM2.5 is often made up of highly toxic components, and so it has significant effects on health over and above just its size.
For us, we are not research fellows. Please consider us like a school kids. Is it possible to protect ourselves from these kind of PM 2.5 particles using mask kind of things?
Absolutely. Pre-COVID, the reason that people used to wear masks, at least in northern India and particularly in Delhi, was during high pollution season in winters. N95 masks or similar grade masks that were used prominently during COVID times can do equally well in protecting you against air pollution exposure.
Fine. And also, according to the report says that India is not following WHO guideline value of 15 microgram per cubic meters in PM 2.5. We have our own standards. Why should we be worried on this?
Sure. So two things. One is the WHO guideline is a recommendation based on global health evidence that the World Health Organization has given provided to all member nations. So based on its sort of systematic review of all of the evidence that is published around the world, it has set what it considers a guideline value for what is acceptable levels of exposure. So 15 micrograms over the course of a day, not to be exceeded more than a few times a year, and over the course of an entire year, less than 5 micrograms. This is the WHO guideline. Now, if you compare that to what we are experiencing on an annual basis in, say, Delhi, In our study, the average air pollution levels in Delhi, PM2.5 levels, were above 110 micrograms. So we are talking about 20 times higher than what annual average exposures would be. And our national ambient air quality standards, which were previously revised only in 2009 and have not been updated since then, are significantly weaker. So over 24 hours, our Indian standards consider 60 micrograms of exposure okay. Why this is a problem is because in our study, we are able to see significant effects on mortality even below the Indian standard and above the WHO standard. And so this means that our standard isn't doing particularly well in terms of protecting public health.
So our guideline value is 60, I think so.
Correct.
But WHO guideline value is only 15.
That's right.
Okay, it's really need to worry about it. And also, I have one more question. The report shows some Indian cities are less polluted, even though cities like Chennai, these cities are reporting mortalities due to air pollution. What is the reason? Because
So if
it
I
is
can
less polluted.
also add one thing to the previous question, the reason why the air quality standard should be revised is because the way we categorize what is a good or bad air quality day is dependent on our current standard. So anything below 60 is considered a good air quality day, and anything above 60 is considered poor or severe plus, etc., according to our air quality index, which is used to communicate the harms of air pollution. Now, if we are seeing significant health harms, even in the cities that you're talking about, like Chennai and Bangalore and Hyderabad, for instance, where the cities are currently meeting the ambient air quality standards set by India, we are still seeing 2,000 to 4,000 deaths in each one of these cities every year because of air pollution exposure, which means that the standard is not doing its job effectively.
So what we are categorizing cities as less polluted they are not actually less polluted. They are really well polluted.
They're only less polluted than Delhi. They're not less polluted in comparison to clean places.
Compared to heavily polluted cities compared
Correct.
to. Okay. And also your study keeps referring to short-term exposure. How do you define it, short-term exposure?
Thank you. So in this study particularly, we defined short-term exposure as exposure on the past 48 hours.
Okay. So past 48 hours, how much exposure they got?
Correct.
So let us say from an example, I am living in a city in India and I work at a 9 to 5 job and I need to travel by public transport for work. How I can protect, in this scenario, what is the short-term exposure? Please explain to me.
Sure. So short-term exposures can be quite high depending on the mode of transport that you take to commute. So there was a study that was published in Delhi, for instance, which showed that in traffic, if you're sitting in traffic for long periods of time, your exposure during that period could be upwards of 800 or 1,000 micrograms per cubic meter, which is significantly higher than what you should be exposed to. But that level of exposure was observed when you were in an open vehicle, so either an auto rickshaw or a bus or a cycle or a motorcycle. Now, what can people do to protect themselves when they're commuting like this? The best thing that they can do is wear a mask during their periods of commute so that they are not exposing themselves for two reasons. One is there are these high levels, and the kind of air pollution that you're exposed to is the most toxic air pollution. It's byproduct of vehicular emissions. So the tailpipes are very close to you. You're breathing freshly emitted exhaust, which is particularly toxic to human health and could be potentially carcinogenic with longer exposures.
Vehicle pollution is worst thing according to you.
Any kind of combustion related emission. So it could be because you're burning coal in a thermal power plant. It could be because you're burning petrol or diesel in a car or a bus. It could be related to burning wood or dung in your home for cooking on a cook stove. All of those emissions that are produced as a result of burning something are particularly harmful.
Generally in cities, nobody cooking using the woods. And generally in rural area, people are cooking using woods. So in rural area,
that may be true, but I think even in many urban centers, still there are informal settlements or slums where people have no choice but to rely on wood or dung or coal for cooking. So there is still a good 8 to 10% in most cities which are reliant on traditional fuels for cooking.
So is there any measurements in cities we are measuring pollution level, but in rural areas, is there any standards are we following to measure the pollution level, as you said, in cooking, that kind of things?
So over the last 5 years or 7 years, India has substantially expanded its capacity to monitor air pollution, but almost all of that capacity has been installed in cities. So whether it be the 130 odd cities that have been classified as non-attainment under the National Clean Air Program, or similarly across other government-funded programs, all of those monitors are being installed in major cities. Rural India is largely unmonitored. So even though we know there are sources of air pollution in rural India, whether it be industries or household cook stove related smoke, we don't really have measurements apart from indoors, and occasionally through the use of modeled air pollution exposures using satellite data and various other sources.
Thank you, Bhargav, for sharing your insights with our audience. Thank you so much.
Thank you.